Hello, and welcome to Charted, an astrology podcast. My name is James, and today we are going to talk about the sixth house in astrology. So last week we talked about the fifth house and how that is a wonderful house, the house of good fortune, right? It's about a bunch of good things: children, romance, fun, passions, enjoyments, competition, right? It's pretty much just about all the good things in life, right? This week we're going to talk about the sixth, and the sixth is total opposite of that. It is going to be way different. And that'll make sense here in a moment, why that is. But this is the thing with astrology, is every house in the chart, all are areas of life we have to deal with. They're all areas of life or parts of us that define who we are and how we are. Right? So even if it's a hard or difficult house, doesn't mean we have to ignore it. If anything, we should embrace it and understand it. Use it to the best of our abilities. So that being said, sixth house, let's discuss it. Why is it so difficult? Right? And it's considered one of the two worst houses alongside the 12th. Or I don't want to say worst, but most challenging. They're two challenging houses. So why is it so challenging? Well, let's unpack this one by one. Number one, it's the last house we're going to look at that's on the under the horizon. So there's a private element to it. It's not really private in the kind of you do it right in the privacy of your own home, but it's just not really about things out in the broader world. It's kind of a better way to phrase that, right? So it's below the horizon. It's on the western half of the chart, which means there's an other person component to it. Right? It's not purely a me, myself, and I, what I'm doing. There's other people involved in this house. And even more so than the fifth, because it's part of the seventh house triad. Right? It is a cadent house in the seventh house triad. What are the cadent houses? We've looked at a couple of them. Actually, one other one, the third house. But the cadent houses are what came before the angle. So while your mother was in labor, right before you were born, an hour or two, you would have had different signs on the angles. Your chart would have been rotated by about one house each. And so whatever sign was on the angle while your mother, right before you were born, would have been what is now, once you're born, the sixth house, right? It came before. So it's kind of already shown up and did its thing, and now it's done. Right? That's kind of conceptually how they looked at it. But what it means in practice is the cadent houses tend to be depleting in nature. We look at the fifth house and how it's part of its succeedent nature, right? Succeedent, they come after, filled with potential. Cadent houses are potential that's already been spent. So now if you want to make use of them, if you want them to improve over time, you have to pour in energy just to kind of maintain them, right? They don't really have anything to grow, anything to really give. They just kind of are. And so there's an element to the cadent houses that you just kind of have to put up with them. And different ones have more difficulty with that than others. Sixth house being one of the more difficult ones, certainly. But yeah, so the sixth house is cadent house, right? Another issue, it's in aversion to the first. So the relationship a house has to the first house is going to be very important. Why? Because the first house represents you. It's the house of self. So if you have a house that's in aversion or is in a difficult spot relative to you, that's going to be an area of life that naturally provides some level of challenge or frustration. In the case of aversions, they tend to be frustrating. And specifically, this is a 150-degree aspect, right, called a quincunx or an inconjunction. Is the other name. And what that tends to play out as is kind of like an itch you can't scratch. It's just something that's kind of pops up from time to time that's annoying, that you can't really do anything about. And sometimes it works out for you very nicely, right? And that's the nature of the inconjunction. Sometimes it kind of just naturally flows and, oh, okay, well, I wasn't really expecting that. And it worked out, cool. And we move along. And then other times it's like, oop, here we go. Halt. I got this challenge. I got this issue. That's kind of annoying, and I got to deal with it now. And that's the nature of it. There's not really a consistency Sometimes it helps and sometimes it doesn't. But either way, it's just there and it's frustrating. By whole sign, the sixth house aversion aspect also is going to be one where, or aversion just generally, any aversion in a chart is going to be something where the first house has nothing in common, right? Different elements, different modalities, different genders, right? There's nothing in common between a first and a sixth house, which is part of why it's frustrating. It's totally operating out of sync with what the first house is. Last thing is that the sixth house is the joy of Mars. And Mars is one of the malefic planets. Right? Fifth house we looked at last week, joy of Venus, one of the benefics. Right? That's why it's such a nice house in addition to the other things. It basically has all the good stuff going on all at once, which is why it's such a good house. This time we've got basically everything bad kind of culminating, right? Aversion, cadent, and now a malefic in its joy. And so this is why the sixth house is so challenging, is because it's got depleted energy, so it means you have to expend energy just to maintain it. It's an aversion, so it's naturally uncomfortable because it's in a way that you aren't used to doing or isn't really naturally how you do things. And it's got a harsh planet that's its joy, that's going to give it some of its meaning. And the malefic planets are harsh because they deal with hard things. Life is not easy. Life is hard. And the components to life that are difficult are what are represented, by and large, not all of it, but by and large, by the malefic planets, which is why they're called malefic. They're dealing with challenging things. So what do we get then when we kind of tie all this together? Right? What do we get when we combine all this and see what the sixth house is about? Well, it's going to be about two things. Number one, it's going to be about obstacles. And the second thing is going to be about servitude. So let's unpack these. First, it's obstacles. What are obstacles? Well, pretty obvious. It's right stuff that gets in your way. So if you have an obstacle, right, it means, hey, I wanted to go get food and I open the fridge and bam, there's no food in the fridge. Oops, forgot to go to the store. So you got to go get it, right? That's an obstacle. I'm hungry now, but I have something I have to do first or I can't eat, right? And that's very minor. But sometimes obstacles are things like, right, you got an injury, can't work your job. It's a pretty big obstacle, really big obstacle, right? So obstacles can be anything and everything, as small, mundane things to very large things that come across and smack us around a bit and force us to adjust. So not only is the sixth house then going to represent the kinds of things that delay us, that frustrate us, that get in our way, but it also is going to represent how we handle those things. And very specifically, it's going to be how we handle those things in a more material sense. The sixth house is going to be the house of crisis, but in terms of physical action, physical crisis. Mental crisis we'll see in the eighth house, and we'll talk about that in 2 weeks. But the sixth house is how we work through challenges. That might be a better term instead of obstacles, but obstacles produce challenge, right? You're working on something at work and boom, something big gets put across your desk that you don't know how to do. But your boss wants it by the end of the day. Okay, that is a challenge. That's an obstacle, right? You got to figure that out. So the sixth house is how we deal with that kind of stuff. And like I said, it can be as small and mundane as I need to figure out how I'm going to get more food in my fridge by going to the store. Or it can be really, really life-altering, challenging stuff. I got in a car accident and lost my leg, right? I got drafted. I've got, right, whatever. Huge things, issues that you got to figure out how to manage, how to deal with. So the sixth house shows us what types of obstacles, what kind of challenges we tend to face. So if you have planets there, those are the kinds of things you're going to be dealing with persistently until you figure out how to deal with them. Or thematically, that might be a better word. So for example, if you have Venus in the sixth house, this is an easy example. If you got Venus in the 6th house, a lot of obstacles you will face tend to be Venusian in nature. Could be relationships. There's definitely a high probability that relationships would be the types of issues, but it could be other things too, right? Values, sensual things. Maybe you become very hedonistic. Materialism kind of holds you back. It depends on the rest of your chart, but sixth house is going to show the types of obstacles and challenges we tend to face until we learn how to adjust to them, learn how to orient to them. And again, it's things that are going to come up from time to time, kind of at random. And sometimes they'll work out pretty nicely. Sometimes they're going to be hard. Right? That's the nature of that kind of in conjunction aversion. 6th house is going to show how we handle those things, our mindset, our application. Virgo rising, as an example. Virgo has Aquarius in the 6th house. Why are Virgos so good at problem solving? It's because they got Aquarius in the 6th house. Aquarius is very eclectic. And when you're eclectic, when you pull from lots of different places, you tend to be very innovative. Human history always sees leaps and bounds of innovation whenever large groups of people are able to get together who hadn't previously been together because they can share information. And that's the nature of Aquarius, is kind of this, hey, we're all collectively here. And when you associate with large groups of people, large groups of ideas, large groups or large ways of differentiated ways of doing things, you start to realize, hey, this is the best way to do that, and this and that, pull from that. And that's the nature of why Virgos tend to be very good problem solvers. Right? Think of 6th house as problem-solving house. It's how you work through things, how you problem-solve things. Very much in the physical sense, though. Now, what about... actually, one other thing with this. So the 6th house deals with how we work through things, which means it's going to be the areas in life that we tend to work. Where do we tend to work? Well, employment, for one. This is going to tie into the other aspect of the 6th house here in a moment. So the 6th house will deal with, right, work. It's not going to be your job or your career, but it can represent your job, if that makes sense. But not necessarily your career. Career would be 10th house. But there is a job aspect to it. Why? Because what is a job? It's work, right? You got to work. It's a challenge. It's something you have to do. And this kind of have to do is really going to be the kind of core element of the other half of the meaning of this house, right? The servitude nature of it. And that might be a better way of explaining obstacles or challenges. It's just things we have to put up with, things we have to work through that we don't really have much of a choice to deal with. The 6th house being the joy of Mars means it's a house where challenge, because Mars likes challenge, and conflict are going to happen. So if you have a fight with somebody, you'd look to the 6th. And because of that nature of dealing with conflict and dealing with challenges, it's also going to represent enemies and the people that act as those opponents to us. And specifically, open enemies. Hidden enemies is going to be a different house. There's kind of different ways of looking at it. I've always used the 12th as hidden enemies. But open enemies is 6th house for sure. Because it's going to be the people that, right, oppose. They're enemies. They're obstacles. Something to be challenged, to be fought. So the 6th house deals with our fighting, our conflict-oriented, our problem-solving skills, how we handle it. 6th house is also going to deal with health afflictions. Why? Because those are things that trip us up, that slow us down in a very physical sense. It's not going to deal with mental conditions so much. Again, that's going to be different houses, 8th and 12th. But the physical things that we deal with that are challenging to us will certainly be the 6th, which means, by its nature, health issues, particularly chronic or big diseases like cancer or anything like that is certainly going to be 6th house types of obstacles. Now, what about servitude? Because this ties in a lot, right? Why Why servitude? Let's talk about Mars for a moment. If you want a better, more in-depth look at Mars, go see my episode on Mars. Did it a while back. But one of the things with Mars that we need to understand for this to kind of make sense is Mars is not the primary. Mars is about action. But the action Mars has is not based on the will of Mars, necessarily. You can give in to that. You can give in to Martian will and Martian desire, but that tends to be more base, more biologically driven. I'm horny. I'm hungry, right? Very selfish, very testosterone, masculine oriented. It's immature masculinity. And as I said, it's very base level, kind of think caveman, right? Just acting on instinct. That's Mars desires, instinctual desires. So by and large, you don't want to be driven purely by that, right? And Mars, even though it's about action, is not really, if we only operated on that level, then we'd still be animals, right? You could say we probably still are animals in certain ways. I mean, technically, yes, but we have a sun and a moon, right? The king and the queen in our charts. And the sun is about what? It's our soul, it's our conscious, it's also our willpower, our purpose. And so in a lot of ways, the sun acts as the thing that guides Mars and says, hey, I have bigger desires than just being a base instinctual animal, right? I have things I want to do, things I want to accomplish. The moon, for its part, also has similar things going on, right? But it's more needs-oriented. I need food. I need shelter, right? I need to be loved. And that pushes you to act in certain ways, right? More subconsciously. But the solar aspect of it is, hey, I have things I want to do. I want to become a scientist. I want to become a doctor. I want to become a mechanic, right? Whatever your heart's desire is, the sun has things it wants to do. I want to help people. I want to make money, right? Whatever your goal, your ambitions are, right? The sun is there kind of being the real light, shining that thing and saying, hey, I want to go in this direction. And much like you look at any medieval hierarchy, what happened? The king had orders, he had directives, he had laws, decrees. But was he the one that carried them out? No, he passed them down to his underlings. He passed it down to his right and left-hand man and said, here, right? Here you go, captain. Go do this thing I've decreed. And then the captain or the knight or whoever would go out and do it. If you watched the show Game of Thrones or read the books, right, you had this position called the hand of the king, right? That's what Mars is. It's the hand of the king. It's the guy that the king says, here's what I want, go do it. So Mars, even though it kind of has its own base instinct things that it wants when it gives into it, at the end of the day is beholden to a higher power, to a higher purpose. So Mars has to act on the behalf of somebody else. It's not really doing its own things. And that's a whole topic for a different day. But what I wanted to get at with this is that dynamic of being beholden to somebody else's will in terms of what Mars is what we see in the sixth house. So the sixth house represents servitude because it represents being beholden to other things or to other people, very specifically. What are some ways we could see that? Well, very easily. Fifth house deals with children, right? What's the next house right after children? It's servitude. Because what do you have to do when you have kids? You got to take care of them. They cannot take care of themselves. I have 3-year-old twins, and I've very freshly been through this whole baby process. It is hard work, right? And I'm not even the mom. But it's hard work. It's taxing. And you are now compelled to what? Put another life before your own. Right? You have this other thing you have to take care of that you have to think about. In a marriage or a partnership, right? It's the same thing. when you're partnered up with somebody, right? It's no longer we are two individuals acting independently. We now have to think of the other person. You're beholden to them, which means there are certain things you have to learn to adjust, learn to do with them, right? And there's a sense of, hey, I have to make sure I take care of this person. And sometimes it comes at the cost of your own wants and desires. What are some other ways? Parents, right, when they get older, what you got to do, or grandparents possibly, right? You take care of them. Why? Because just like a child, they begin to lose the ability to take care of themselves, especially at extreme old age, right? And so what do you have to do? You're now in service to them, right? It's something you just have to do. There's no choice, really. I mean, you could choose, but a lot of times it's going to have very disastrous consequences. And so that's the nature of the sixth house, is going to be the things that show up in life that you just kind of have to, just work through it. Just deal with it. Just endure it. And in a lot of cases, it's going to come from other people. Right? I think I mentioned work earlier. Right? Your boss puts a big project on your desk and says, hey, I want this by the end of the day. You're beholden to him. You're serving him. This is why sixth house represents work. And the people we work for, right? Why? Because we're beholden to them. In ancient times, they called the sixth house of slavery. For the most part, I think, to the best of my knowledge, the world has largely kind of gotten rid of that. It certainly exists in small pockets here and there, at least maybe not in the traditional sense as we kind of conceptualize it, at least here in the West. But sixth house was slavery. Why? Because when you're a slave, you are beholden to somebody else, regardless of your own will. Right? And that's kind of the nature of the sixth house. Whenever you're stuck in situations where you are beholden to something else that you just have to deal with, that you have to listen to them, you have to do what they want you to do, and it's not really your own will, right? That's uncomfortable. It's difficult, or it can be. A client nature, right? If you have a client, what do you have to do? You have to do their wishes, right? At least if you're a good employer or a good, good at your job. And so sixth house is going to represent things like clients. Why? Because you serve them, right? It's somebody you are beholden to, even if for something small, kind of mundane. So the sixth house is going to represent the people that we are beholden to, the people that have power over us in some way where we have to do things for them, right? That serving aspect of things. By consequence, then, it also means the sixth house is going to represent the people that serve us. So, if you're if you're president of a company, you're going to have employees, right? Unless you're self-employed, kind of doing your own thing. But if you have employees, what are they? They're people that are now serving you, right? In a way. And so the sixth house kind of represents both sides of that coin. For most people, though, it's going to be the I'm serving somebody else aspect of it. And it doesn't have to be one area of life. It's going to be a lot of areas of life, because at the end of the day, if you live in society in any way, shape, or form, you're going to have things and obligations towards other people at some point, whether it's family, friends, the government, work, right? It doesn't matter. So the sixth house represents all those things, which also means it's going to represent how you handle those things, right? How you operate in those spheres. Scorpio rising, right? Why is Scorpio rising so, well, might be a different answer to that question, actually. Scorpio risings have Aries in the sixth house, right? So their first and their sixth are linked by the same ruler. Scorpios are very hardworking, or can be. They're also very good at handling challenges. Why? Because Aries is in the sixth, and Aries likes to jump in and confront things. And so Scorpios have a very good knack for crisis, for challenge, but also for serving people. Scorpios are going to be typically quick to want to serve other people. Depending on their sun, if they got sun Leo in the 10th, that might not hold true as much. Or I guess depending on their Venus too, but maybe that's a bad example. But by and large, you look at somebody's 6th house and it's going to tell you the nature of how they deal with wanting to serve other people. Also, Scorpios are very independent. And you see this in other aspects of their chart as well, but what is their 6th house? It's Aries. When they want to work through things, when they want to serve other people, when they want to handle obstacles, what do I want to do? I want to do it myself, right? Aries. I'm not thinking of everybody else. I'm thinking of me and how I'm going to get through this obstacle. And so that's the kind of thing you would look at for the 6th house, right? What's the sign, what planets you have, because it's going to show how do you operate in that realm. Do you have hard, right? Do you power through things? You got Mars there. Or you're very good at handling conflict, handling difficulty, working for other people. Or do you have a soft planet like Venus, right, or Jupiter, which gives you more whimsical touch, more sensual touch, right? Softer touch, the way you handle those things. So that's the 6th house, by and large, right? What it represents, again, it's challenges, obstacles, all that kind of thing. It's going to be the people, the types of things that kind of impose them on us, as well as how we handle them, how we handle conflict resolution, how we handle challenges. Do we run away from them? Do we try to sidestep them? Or do we just take them head on? Do we do it with other people or do we do it by ourselves? Right? All of that is going to be a part of it, as well as then the people that we are beholden to, as well as the people beholden to us, and our relationship with them and how we operate and interact with them. Now, the 6th house, looking at it from an aspect perspective, right? It's going to be in trine to what? The 10th and the 2nd. Let's discuss this for a second. Trine to the 10th actually makes a lot of sense. If the 6th house deals with how you work through things, that means it's naturally conducive to showing how you work. And how you work is naturally conducive to what you do in your career, which is going to be the 10th house, right? So there's a natural flow there. That's why it's a trine relationship. They go hand in hand. The 2nd house deals with resources. If you work hard, or how you work and how you approach obstacles and how you deal with challenges is going to naturally influence the types of resources you get. Because if you don't work, you're going to be poor, by and large. Unless you got a rockin' 8th house. So that's the other dynamic there, right? That's why it's in trine to those houses. What about the opposition? The opposition is the 12th. 12th is about hidden things. It's about the subconscious. It's about spirituality, right? The 12th house is isolating, and it's about isolation, about solitude. Well, you can't really serve other people when you're alone, right? And this is part of the opposition, as well as the 12th house is dealing with things that you don't know. You can't fight a crisis you don't know. You also cannot serve somebody that you do not understand. And so this is why they're in opposition to each other. There's a polarity there. On the other hand, right, when you take time to reflect, take time to yourself, right, that allows you to think things through. So that can be the kind of beneficial component there. They're kind of an awkward pairing, admittedly. But the 12th house is going to be a bit more murky and tricky for the 6th. Which is, again, part of why they're in opposition to each other. What about the other hard houses for the 6th? Right? It's going to be the 3rd. And the 3rd deals with our day-to-day. Right? And that makes sense. Why? Because it's an intense aspect. It's in a square to the 6th. Well, right? If our day-to-day gets disrupted, we have an obstacle. What do we got to do? We got to work through it. And so that natural sense of challenge that comes in through work disrupts your day-to-day. Very obviously, if you've got to go to work every day, right? You have to reorient your day-to-day schedule around it. How you handle your local space. Your local space could change based on your work, based on the obstacles you run into, or if you have a health crisis, right? Or some other calamity. And that's the thing. Sixth house is going to represent calamities. I don't hope that I stressed that enough, but it's both the really, really crappy things that happen, but also sometimes, most of the time, it's just kind of the minor inconveniences as well. But it's how we handle it, right? How we work through stuff. That's going to be the thing to hone in on, because at the end of the day, you cannot stop random chance. If something bad happens to you, most of the time it's out of your hands. Sometimes by your own actions. But by and large, right, if random things happen, you get in a car accident, for instance, somebody T-bones you, that wasn't in your control, right? But how you respond to it, what you do with that is, and that's the benefit of the sixth house, because it allows you to actually respond. It allows you to actually work through something to get to the other side, because there always is another side. All right, going back to the square aspects. The other square is going to be the ninth house. Ninth house deals with how we grow ourselves. And this is interesting, but I think more of a helpful square in a lot of ways. Why? Because when you go through challenge is naturally going to force you to adjust, right? And when you adjust, when you challenge yourself, what do you naturally do? You grow. So the sixth house actually, even though it's a square, tends to be somewhat of a beneficial thing. But on the other hand, as you grow and as you go out into the world, right, what's that going to mean? It means you're going to run into new people, new ideas, and new ideas are challenging because it forces you to have to sit with things, think about things that you didn't before. And when you run into new people, they have different ways of doing things that are going to come into conflict with your own, right? So as the ninth house grows, it always is going to kind of bring back things to challenge you in the sixth. What about the houses in sextile? In the sixth house, the first sextile is going to be the eighth. Right? This one actually makes a lot of sense. Why? Because the eighth house deals with two things. Number one, mental crisis. And number two, it's shared resources. Well, if you're working for other people, you're naturally going to acquire resources from others, right? It's a very similar dynamic to the second. So that makes sense. Number two, right, whenever there's a physical crisis, mental crisis usually follows. Right? Sometimes it's delayed. You get in a bad car accident, you gotta work through that first, right? Gotta heal up. But then comes okay, how do I live my life with this new issue, right? This new health issue, this new whatever. And then that's the mental component to it. And sometimes it's psychological, sometimes emotional. PTSD, what have you. A lot of that stuff develops from unresolved issues in the sixth. Or alternatively, sometimes we are very stressed, we're very anxious, we're very what have you, right? And that leads to what? Complications on our physical body. The mind and the body are linked. And when one suffers, it tends to allow the suffering to flow through to the other, right? So that's the sextile. There's opportunity there between the mental and the physical in terms of challenges, in terms of crises. The other sextile is going to be the fourth. And this one, again, kind of makes sense, right? Fourth is what? Home, family, right? Family is somebody you're kind of beholden to, especially as a child. What do? You're stuck. You have to do the whims of your parents. You don't really have a choice. Right? And then as you get older, again, what do you got to do? You got to take care of your parents. Theoretically. You don't have to, but you should. And so it's kind of the same dynamic where family is something that's naturally just, you're always kind of dealing with them, right? And it's naturally going to be conducive to showing you how to handle conflict as well. How you handle conflict resolution, how you work through things is going to be something you're taught by your family. So it's going to be in kind of a natural progression. You don't have to accept those teachings. Most of the time we kind of do subconsciously. And then later as we go through life, we get new experiences, and we realize, hey, maybe the way my family was doing this is not the best way. Or sometimes we say, hey, no, now I have confirmation it was the best way. And then lastly, the houses that are in aversion are going to be the first, which we've already talked about, right? Why? Work is hard. That's naturally very uncomfortable for the self. Challenges are hard. Also, being beholden to somebody else is hard. It naturally means I can't focus on me. I have to focus on what they need, what they want. So that aversion makes sense. The 11th house is the other in conjunction, right? And that one is the house of hopes, dreams, as well as friends, social groups. When you're stuck beholden to somebody else, it tends to take away from achieving your dreams. Sometimes it can work in harmony with it, but a lot of times it's kind of taken away from that. Or from, socializing. Can't socialize. I got to take care of my kids tonight. Sorry. Right? So that's why it's in conjunction, in aversion. Right? There's just not really any resonance. Plus, friends are not conducive to helping you at work unless you work with them. The other houses in aversion are going to be the 7th, right? House of the other person, close personal relationships, as well as kind of our attachments. And this dynamic is interesting because, again, you have service and you have the other person. They go hand in hand in a lot of ways, but it's definitely a piece of relationships that's uncomfortable. Serving another person that you're intimately related to it's uncomfortable sometimes. It's something you just have to do, though, if you want it to succeed. So it's kind of always there in the background, but you can make it enjoyable. Why? Because love gets involved a lot of times, especially with a partner. Then the other one is going to be the 5th house, which makes very obvious sense. That the 5th house is about children, right? What do you have to do? You got to serve them, which means you can't play with them. You can. You definitely should play with your kids, but I'm just saying it takes away from your own passions, romance, for example. But again, 5th house is fun things. It's enjoyments, and that's not naturally conducive to solving problems, right? They don't really fit together very nicely. So that's that aversion. So that's pretty much everything. 6th house, as we've said, it's about obstacles. It's about challenges. It's about crisis. It's about the things that come up in life that we kind of get stuck doing. And that means it's going to represent how we handle those things. How do we handle crisis? How do we handle challenges? How do we handle being beholden to something or to somebody, which means it's going to represent the people that get put in our life who act as an obstacle, an enemy perhaps, a rival. But it's also going to be the people that come into our lives that we are beholden to, that we have to serve in some capacity, whether it's a very serious sense, like a child or a parent, or a close friend who's injured, or something more mundane, right? Your boss, right? Or a friend asks you for a favor. And it's also going to represent then, right, the people that have that same relationship with us. So the 6th house, challenging house, not one that you really get a lot out of, but having it poor, having it negative in a chart is certainly going to cause a lot of issues. So even if I don't want to say if you don't have it good, if the 6th house is one of those houses that you really have to manage a lot, right? There's not really getting a lot of good from it. It's not like the 5th. It's not like the 11th or even the 9th, where a lot of good things can kind of come from it, right, if you invest in it. The 6th house, really, it's something you invest in so that it doesn't cause problems, right? One thing, for example, health issues. If you don't invest in staying in shape, eating good food, or at least eating healthy food, quality food, what's going to happen, right? Your body's going to deteriorate. Your body's going to suffer, and you're going to, right, be weaker, possibly have health issues, and so on. And so that's the nature of the 6th house. It's just stuff we got to do. And if you don't manage it, it just kind of gets out of hand, and that's when it gets you. But if you do manage it, it's not like you really get much from it. You're just kind of keeping it from getting you. So anyway, that's the 6th house. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Definitely a more challenging one for sure. I am a practicing astrologer, so if you're looking for a reading, you want to dive into issues of your own 6th house, right? You can reach out to me. My email is james@jdastrology.com. Alternatively, you can just go to my website and contact me there. You set up a booking there. The website is jdastrology.com. So hope you enjoyed, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the week.